Once Lily signs all that inheritance over, we don't need her anymore." That sentence came from my husband, Mark, talking to my mother-in-law in our living room while I stood frozen outside the front door. 3 weeks later, Mark was the one sitting in a courtroom, pale and shaking, while everyone stared at him like he was a stranger. As always, before we dive into a story with an ending that's going to feel so satisfying, let's do a quick roll call. Type present and tell me which city you're watching this story from in the comments. For everyone who's already liked and subscribed, I pray that God makes your problems easier, widens your income, and keeps you healthy. Thank you, my friends. Now listen carefully to my story. I had just come back from my father's funeral in the village when everything started to fall apart. My name is Lily. I'm 32, I have a 6-year-old daughter named Chloe, and until a few months ago, I still believed that my husband, Mark, and I were a team. We lived in a small house in the city with his mother-in-law, Helen. She liked to call it our family home, but really it was Mark's house before we got married, and she never let me forget that I was the outsider who came in later. "Lily, you should be grateful," she often said, sitting in the living room while I was in the kitchen washing dishes. "If it wasn't for Mark, you'd still be stuck in that village with your old father." Every time she said that, it felt like a slap. My father was not perfect, but he worked hard his whole life as a farmer. He raised me alone after my mom was gone. He didn't have much money, but he gave me everything he could. Mark would never defend me. He would just clear his throat and say, "Come on, Mom," and then change the subject. I told myself he was avoiding more conflict. Now I know he was avoiding choosing sides. When my father passed away, I went back to the village with Chloe. Mark didn't come. He said work was crazy and someone had to stay with his mother. In reality, his mother said, "You go, Mark. You're the man. You can't keep running to the village for every little thing. Let Lily handle it. It's her father." So I went alone with my daughter. The funeral was simple. People from the village came, shared stories, ate food. I felt like I was moving through fog. I was sad, tired, and also worried about how I was going to handle everything with his house and land. On the third day, a man in a suit came to the house. He introduced himself as Mr. Harris, my father's lawyer. "Your father prepared something before he was gone," he said gently. "Can we talk in private?" We sat at the old wooden table in the front room while Chloe napped in the bedroom. My hands were still rough from washing dishes and sweeping. His hands looked soft and clean as he opened a folder. "Your father didn't tell you?" he asked gently. I shook my head. I always said he had nothing. Mr. Harris smiled sadly. "Your father was modest. He sold part of his land 2 years ago. He put the money in a fixed deposit and some government bonds. With interest, it's now about $60 million. I stared at him. $60 million? "Yes," he said, "and you were the only heir. It's all in your name." My first thought wasn't about myself. It was, I can finally pay off Mark's credit card debt. We can fix the leaking roof. We can save for Chloe's school. My eyes filled with tears. I was sad because my father never told me he had done this. He must have quietly planned it, wanting to make sure I'd be okay when he was gone. We spent the next hour going over documents. Mr. Harris explained which bank the money was in, what I needed to sign, and how I could either keep it invested or move it. He recommended that for now, we keep it where it was until I decided. "I'll support whatever you choose," he said. "But remember, Lily, this money is yours. Your father wanted it to be your safety net and your daughter's future." I nodded, still overwhelmed. I stayed 2 more days to arrange the house and some small things. Once everything was at least under control, I packed our bags and took Chloe back to the city. I was tired, but there was a small seed of hope in my chest. I couldn't wait to tell Mark that our financial problems were finally going to ease up. I thought he would hug me and say, "Thank God we can breathe." I thought he would be happy for me. I was wrong. We reached the house in the afternoon. Chloe was half asleep, leaning on my shoulder as I carried her. I dragged our suitcase along the small path to the front door. As I reached for the handle, I heard voices inside. Mark's voice, Helen's voice. Normally, I would ring the bell or push the door open right away, but something in their tone made me stop. I don't know why I hesitated. I guess my body knew before my brain did. I put the suitcase down quietly and stayed still. "She got $60 million, my mother-in-law said. "Are you sure?" "Mr. Harris called while she was still in the village," Mark replied. "He said all of it is in her name, only in her name." Helen let out a cold little laugh. Of course the old man would spoil his princess. But listen, Mark, that money is not really hers. You're her husband. It belongs to you as head of the family. "How, Mom?" Mark said. "The account is under her name. She has to sign everything." "That's why we need her to transfer it. We tell her you'll manage it for the family. You know she's soft. You'll feel guilty if you start talking about your debts and Chloe's school." Mark sighed. "She's been different lately. She questions me more." "That's because you let her think she has a say," Helen snapped. "You need to remind her who brings in the money." I felt my stomach tighten. Then Mark said the rhyme that burned itself into my brain. "Once Lily signs all that inheritance over, we don't need her anymore." There was a pause. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. Helen lowered her voice. "Exactly. And remember what the agent explained about the policy? If anything happens to her, the insurance money goes straight to you. The inheritance will be in your account, too. Then it's just you, me, and Chloe, a proper family." Insurance? Policy? My head spun. Mark asked quietly, "You think that is necessary?" "Stop acting innocent," she said. "Life is hard. Sometimes we need to make tough choices. It's not like you're going to hit her yourself. Accidents happen. Cars crash. Stairs are slippery. Pills get mixed up." My legs went weak. I had to press my back against the wall to stay standing. I looked down at Chloe. She had opened her eyes and was staring at me confused. I quickly put a finger to my lips, begging her to stay quiet. Inside, Mark whispered, "What about Chloe? She loves her mother." Helen snorted. "She's a child. She'll forget. You'll tell her mom went away. You don't want your daughter to grow up poor, do you? Do you want her to struggle like Lily's father?" Silence. Then Mark said, "Fine. First, we make her." Helen lowered her voice. "Exactly. And remember what the agent explained about the policy? If anything happens to her, the insurance money goes straight to you. The inheritance will be in your account, too. Then it's just you, me, and Chloe, a proper family." Insurance? Policy? My head spun. Mark asked quietly, "You think that is necessary?" "Stop acting innocent," she said. "Life is hard. Sometimes we need to make tough choices. It's not like you're going to hit her yourself. Accidents happen. Cars crash. Stairs are slippery. Pills get mixed up." My legs went weak. I had to press my back against the wall to stay standing. I looked down at Chloe. She had opened her eyes and was staring at me confused. I quickly put a finger to my lips, begging her to stay quiet. Inside, Mark whispered, "What about Chloe? She loves her mother." Helen snorted. She's a child. She'll forget. You'll tell her mom went away. You don't want your daughter to grow up poor, do you? Do you want her to struggle like Lily's father?" Silence. Then Mark said, "Fine. First, we make her sign. Then we wait. Something will come up. An opportunity." I couldn't listen anymore. I quietly backed away from the door, pulled Chloe with me, and walked to the porch around the side of the house so I could gather myself and pretend we had just arrived without hearing anything. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the suitcase handle. "Mom," Chloe whispered, "why are you crying?" I touched my face and realized tears were running down my cheeks. I wiped them with the back of my hand. "Nothing, honey. Mommy's just tired." Inside, they kept talking, but their words turned into noise. One thing was clear. The two people I trusted with my life were planning to use me and then get rid of me. And I had just walked up to the front door with all the money they wanted in my pocket. I took a few deep breaths, forced a smile onto my face, and walked back to the front door. This time I made sure my footsteps were loud enough. I opened the door and called, "We're home." The conversation inside stopped instantly. Mark came rushing to the hallway with this fake surprised smile on his face. "Lily, you're back earlier than I thought." He hugged me like nothing was wrong. I stood stiff in his arms. Helen came over, pressing her hand to her chest. "Oh, my poor Lily, how are you? You must be so heartbroken." I stared at her. Just 5 minutes earlier, she'd been planning how to erase me from the picture. Now she was the loving mother-in-law. "I'm fine," I managed. "It was hard, but I'm glad to be home." Chloe ran inside, throwing herself onto the couch, switching on the TV like she always did. For a moment, the house looked normal again, but it wasn't. While I unpacked that evening, Mark came into our bedroom and closed the door. He sat on the edge of the bed. "How was everything?" I looked at him, really looked at him, the little lines near his eyes, the way he rubbed his hands together when he was nervous. The man I fell in love with, the father of my child, the man who had just said he didn't need me once he had my money. "The funeral was okay," I said quietly. "Mr. Harris was there." He nodded. "Right, the lawyer. He called me, you know." I pretended to be surprised. "He did?" "Yeah," Mark said casually. "He mentioned something about your father leaving you some money. I don't know the details. He was talking fast." "Lily, that's great. We really need it. Our debts, Chloe's school, Mom's medicine." There it was, the script. I kept my face straight. "We can talk about it later. I'm tired." His smile faded a little. "Sure, of course. We're a team, right? What's yours is mine. What's mine is yours." In my head, I thought, "You already decided what's mine will be yours, and then I'll be gone." I went quiet and turned away so he wouldn't see the look on my face. Act 1 ended for me that night when I found the first real piece of evidence. I couldn't sleep, so I went to the kitchen to get water. On my way back, I passed the small home office room Mark used sometimes. The door was half open. The light was on. Inside, on the desk, I saw a pile of documents. On top of them was a folder with my name on it. My heart pounded. I glanced around, then slipped inside and picked it up. It was an insurance policy, a life insurance policy with my full name on it. The insured person, me. The beneficiary, Mark. The amount, huge, enough to make someone feel very motivated.
My signature was at the bottom. I knew immediately it wasn't mine. The letters were shaped like mine, but off, like someone had practiced copying them. I stood there shaking, staring at the paper. So it wasn't just talk. They had already prepared the pieces. I quietly took photos of every page with my phone, then put the folder back exactly where I found it. When I went back to bed, I lay awake for hours staring at the ceiling. I realized something very clear. If I confronted Mark now, he would twist everything. He would accuse me of being paranoid, of making up stories because I was stressed from losing my father. He would gaslight me until I doubted my own memory. So I did something that before that night I never thought I'd be capable of. I decided to act like I believed him.
And I decided to set a trap. The next few days were the worst performance of my life. At breakfast, Mark would say things like, "Honey, have you thought about what to do with the money? I can help you invest it. You know numbers confuse you sometimes." And I would smile and say, "Maybe you're right. I'm not good with that stuff." Helen would sit there stirring her tea. "Lily, money is dangerous if women handle it alone. Men are better at controlling it. Look at how your father ended up. If he had been smarter, you wouldn't have to struggle now." In my head, I thought if my father hadn't been smart, we wouldn't have this inheritance at all. Out loud, I just nodded. They pushed more and more. Mark started bringing up his debts, saying he was under pressure. He complained about his job, how his boss was on his back. He started acting stressed and moody, like he was the victim in all this. That was their favorite game, reversing roles. They were plotting against me, but they acted like I was the one who owed them. At one point, when I didn't answer right away, he snapped. "If you just sign the transfer already, we can fix everything," he said. "Why are you hesitating? Is this about trusting me? Do you think I'm going to run off with your money?" In my head, I was thinking, yes, that's exactly what I think. But I lowered my eyes and said softly, "I'm just scared, Mark. It's a lot of money. Can we talk to Mr. Harris first? I don't want to do something wrong." Helen slammed her spoon down. "There you go again. You never trust your son. He feeds you, gives you a house, and now when he needs help, you act like he's a stranger." She looked at Chloe. "See, Chloe, Mommy doesn't appreciate Daddy." Using my child as a weapon again. Chloe looked confused. "Mom does appreciate Daddy," she said, frowning. Helen ignored her. "If you don't listen, Lily, don't be surprised if one day you find yourself back in your village and Chloe stays with us where she can live properly." That hit me in the chest. I kept quiet. I knew if I reacted, they would turn everything into Lily is unstable again. That night, when everyone was asleep, I called Mr. Harris. I sat on the bathroom floor with the shower running so no one would hear me. "Mr. Harris," I whispered, "I think my husband and his mother are planning something with the inheritance, and there's an insurance policy in my name I never signed." He was silent for a moment. "Tell me everything, Lily." So I did. I told him about the conversation I overheard, about the insurance folder, about the threats and pressure. When I finished, my voice was shaking. "Can they do something to me?" I asked quietly. "I mean, legally, can they take the money without my consent?" "Legally, no, not without your signature or a forged document. But if what you're saying about the insurance is true, then this is serious. It's not only about the inheritance, it's about your safety." A cold wave went through my body. "What do I do?" I whispered. "First, you don't sign anything they give you. If they insist, tell them you want to meet at the bank with a financial advisor. Second, you gather proof of what they've said. Don't confront them yet. Let them think you're weak and scared. Third, you move the inheritance to a safer structure under your control. I'll help you with that." "Is that possible?" I asked. "Yes, your father put conditions in his will. He was smarter than they think. The money is protected by a trust structure. It can only be moved with your consent, and we can add extra safeguards." He paused. "Lily, do you feel in danger, physically?" I thought about the way Helen talked about accidents. I thought about my signature on the policy. "Yes," I said. "Then you need to document everything," he said. "Record conversations, save screenshots. We might need to involve the police or at least a lawyer friend of mine who handles criminal cases." I closed my eyes. Okay. That's how I stopped being the naive wife and started being the woman they couldn't see coming. For the next 2 weeks, I played 2 roles at the same time. To Mark and Helen, I was the nervous, confused Lily who needed their guidance. To myself, I was quietly collecting every piece of evidence I could. I turned on the voice recorder on my phone and left it on the table when they started talking. I put my phone in my apron pocket when Helen cornered me in the kitchen. "Lily, stop making things difficult," Helen hissed. "Mark is drowning in debt. Don't you care about your husband, or do you only care about money now that you have some?" "I care. I just want to be careful. You're ungrateful. If you don't sign soon, don't come crying to us when Mark gets fired. Maybe an accident has to happen before you wake up and see what really matters." I felt a chill. I kept stirring the soup. Another day, Mark sat next to me on the bed and tried a softer approach. "Babe, I know you're scared," he said, taking my hand. "I get it. It's a big responsibility. But this is why you have a husband. Let me take care of it. We can put some in Chloe's education fund, some to pay off debts, some for investments." "Why do all of it have to be in your account?" I asked, as innocently as I could. He smiled gently like he was talking to a child. "Because it's simpler. One account, one manager. You don't need to worry about numbers and bank forms." He squeezed my hand. "You trust me, right?" In my head, I heard the recording of him saying, "We don't need her anymore." But I looked down and said softly, "Okay, let's do it properly then, at the bank, with an advisor, so I understand." A flash of irritation crossed his face, but he covered it quickly. "Sure, we can do that." Meanwhile, Mr. Harris helped me move the inheritance into a protected structure that required my presence and an extra verification step for any withdrawal. He also checked the insurance policy and confirmed what I already knew. My signature was forged. "This is not something we can ignore," he said. "I've discussed it with my colleague, an ex-prosecutor. He says we should prepare a formal complaint, but we can make it active once we have more solid evidence." We planned everything carefully. The final scene would happen at the bank where Mark wanted to transfer the money. We arranged a meeting with a senior bank manager that Mark thought was just a financial advisor. Mr. Harris and his colleague would be there too, pretending to be neutral advisors at first. There was one thing I didn't plan, though. The surprise witness ended up being my own daughter. 3 days before the bank meeting, something strange happened. I slipped on the stairs. It was morning. I was going down with a laundry basket when my foot suddenly slid. I grabbed the railing and just managed to stop myself from falling all the way down. My heart hammered in my chest. I looked at the steps. They were wet. Someone had spilled something slippery on them. It didn't look like plain water. Helen walked out of the kitchen with a mug in her hand. "Oh my God, Lily, be careful. Stairs can be so dangerous. Imagine if you fell. You could break your neck." She took a slow sip of her drink, watching me. I knew then that our plan wasn't just in my head. They were already trying to create opportunities. That night, Chloe climbed into my bed after Mark fell asleep. "Mom?" she whispered. "Yes, honey?" Grandma and Daddy say weird things when they think I'm asleep. My heart jumped. What kind of things? She looked nervous, like she thought she might get in trouble. One time when you were in the bathroom, they were talking in the living room. I was lying on the couch with my tablet. I pretended to sleep. I pressed record. I stared at her. You recorded them? She nodded and pulled her tablet from under the blanket. I didn't know what they were talking about, but it sounded bad. I got scared. My hands were shaking as I took the tablet. Can I listen? I asked. She nodded. I pressed play. It was their voices, clearer than any recording I had made on my phone. They must have felt safe because they thought Chloe was asleep. If she falls down the stairs, no one can blame us, Helen's voice said. People fall all the time. Mark replied, I don't know, Mom. What if she survives and starts questioning things? Then we try something else. Medicine, maybe. You know she takes those pills sometimes for her headaches. You switch them. Easy. Chloe looked at me with big eyes while I listened, my stomach turning. I kissed her forehead. Thank you for telling me, baby. You did the right thing. Don't show this to anyone else, okay? Not even Daddy or Grandma. This is our secret for now. She nodded and hugged me tightly. That recording became the knife that would cut through all their lies later. The day of the bank meeting finally came. Mark woke up in a good mood. He kissed my cheek, made a big show of being extra sweet in front of Chloe and Helen. Big day, huh? He said, grinning. We're finally going to put that money to work. Yeah, I said, forcing a smile. Big day. Helen wore her nicest dress and her pearl necklace like she was attending some official ceremony. On the way out, she patted my arm. Don't be nervous. We're doing this for your own good. I thought, you're doing this for your own pockets, but I just nodded. At the bank, we were led into a glass meeting room. A man in a suit introduced himself as Mr. Collins, the senior manager. Nice to meet you, Mr. and Mrs. Parker, he said. Please have a seat. A few minutes later, Mr. Harris walked in with another man in a suit. Ah, Mr. Harris, I said, playing dumb. You made it. I did, he said. I brought my colleague, Daniel. He's a financial consultant and also has some legal background. I thought it might be useful so everyone feels safe. Mark looked slightly annoyed. Is that necessary? It never hurts to have clarity when big amounts are involved, Mr. Collins said smoothly. We all sat down. Mark immediately started talking. We're here because my wife received an inheritance from her late father, he said, leaning forward. We want to transfer the full amount into an account under my name so I can manage it for our family. Mr. Collins nodded and took notes. And Mrs. Parker, you agree to this? He asked, turning to me. I could feel Mark's eyes on my face like knives. I took a breath. I have some concerns, I said. Mark shot me a warning look. Helen shifted in her seat. Concerns? Helen said loudly. Lily, we talked about this. Don't start making drama in front of these people. Mr. Collins raised a hand. It's all right. Mrs. Parker has the right to feel fully comfortable. That's why we're here. Mr. Harris cleared his throat. Maybe before we talk about the transfer, we should review the current status of the inheritance, the trust structure, and any related policies that might affect Mrs. Parker's safety and rights. Mark frowned. Related policies? What are you talking about? We're just moving her money. This is a family matter. Daniel, the colleague, spoke calmly. When large sums and life policies are involved, it stops being just a family matter. It's a legal matter, too. We've reviewed some documents connected to Mrs. Parker, and there are inconsistencies. I watched Mark's jaw tighten. Inconsistencies, he repeated. Like what? Mr. Harris took out a folder. For example, this life insurance policy. He slid the copies onto the table. Mark's face changed for a split second before he caught himself. I've never seen that, I said, playing my role, yet it has my name on it. Helen leaned forward. You must have forgotten, Lily. We signed that together months ago. It was for your own security. Mr. Harris shook his head. Mrs. Parker, your supposed signature on this policy does not match your official signature used in the will and bank documents. We had an expert do a preliminary check. There's a serious suspicion that your signature was forged. Silence. Mark scoffed. Forged? That's ridiculous. Why would we forge her signature? She probably signed in a hurry and forgot. She's always like that, clumsy with paperwork. That's true, Helen added quickly. She never understands forms. We help her all the time. Poor thing gets overwhelmed. There it was again. Role reversal. I was suddenly the helpless idiot who couldn't remember signing a policy that made my husband rich if I never came home again. Mr. Collins looked at me. Mrs. Parker, do you remember signing anything like this? I met his eyes and stopped pretending. No, I said clearly. I never signed that, and I never consented to any life insurance where my husband gets a huge payout if something happens to me. Mark spread his hands. You see, she's emotional. Her father just passed away. She's under stress. She's making stories. This is exactly why I need to manage the money. She's not stable. I'm not stable, I repeated, feeling my anger rise. Daniel, the colleague, leaned forward. Mr. Parker, we also have audio recordings where you and your mother discuss this policy and talk about possible accidents that could happen to your wife. Mark's face went white. What? Helen slammed her hand on the table. That's nonsense. You can't record people without their consent. In our country, recording someone where you are present is allowed as evidence, and in this case, your conversations were recorded by someone in the same room. Mark looked at me like he wanted to burn a hole through me. You recorded us? I held his gaze. Not only me. I took out Chloe's tablet from my bag and placed it on the table. This is our daughter's tablet. One night when she pretended to sleep on the couch, you and your mother spoke freely around her. She pressed record. I didn't even know until she told me later. Helen laughed nervously. Kids misunderstand things. They mishear. Mr. Harris raised a hand. We have already listened. Mr. Collins has too. Mr. Collins looked uncomfortable. He pressed a button on the small speaker connected to the tablet. The recording played in the room clear and loud. If she falls down the stairs, no one can blame us. People fall all the time, Helen's voice said. What if she survives and starts questioning things? Mark's voice followed. Then we try something else, Helen said. Medicine, maybe. You know she takes those pills sometimes for her headaches. You switch them. Easy. The room went silent. Even though I had heard of that recording before, my heart still pounded. Hearing it in this bright official room made it feel even more real. Helen started to shake. That's taken out of context, she said. We were just joking. Daniel looked at her. Planning how to switch someone's medication and push them down the stairs is not a joke, Mrs. Parker. Mark slammed his fist on the table. You're turning this into something big. It was just talk. We were frustrated, all right. We'd never really do it. Mr. Harris spoke quietly. Maybe, maybe not. That's for investigators to decide, but combined with a forged insurance policy and your insistence on transferring all of Lily's inheritance into your sole account, it paints a very ugly picture. Mr. Collins cleared his throat. For the record, this bank will not process any transfer of Mrs. Parker's inheritance into any account without her clear, voluntary consent. And given what I've heard today, I strongly advise Mrs. Parker to keep her assets in the protected structure we discussed with Mr. Harris. Mark looked at me like he didn't recognize me. Lily, you're really going to do this to your own husband? You're humiliating me in front of strangers. I almost laughed. He was still trying to play the victim. You were planning to make sure I never came back home, you and your mother. You were going to take my money, then wait for an opportunity. Helen started to cry, loud, ugly tears. I did everything for you. I took you into my house. I treated you like my own daughter. That's not how you talked about me when you thought I wasn't listening, and you know it. Daniel looked at Mark. Mr. Parker, I also need to inform you that based on what we've seen and heard, a preliminary complaint has already been prepared and shared with the authorities. They've asked us to proceed with today's meeting so they can hear your reactions. Mark blinked. Authorities? Right then there was a knock on the glass door. A man and a woman in plain clothes walked in. They showed their IDs. Mr. Mark Parker, Mrs. Helen Parker, the man asked, we'd like you to come with us to answer some questions about possible forgery and conspiracy to harm your wife for financial gain. Helen choked on her own sobs. Conspiracy? This is insane. You can't do this. She's turning my son against me. Mark looked stunned. Lily, say something. Tell them this is a misunderstanding. Think of Chloe. Do you want her father to be dragged into this? I felt my heart twist at the mention of my daughter, but then I remembered how close I had been to falling down those stairs. I remembered the wet steps. I remembered the forged signature, and I remembered my father's tired face when he said, I just want you to be safe when I'm gone, a few months before he passed, when I thought he was only talking about emotions, not money. So I took a breath and said calmly, I want my daughter to have a mother who is alive and not an opportunity. If you cared about her, you wouldn't have planned what you planned. Mark's shoulders dropped. For the first time, he looked small. The officers walked over. Please stand up, sir. Ma'am. They weren't handcuffed on the spot, but everyone knew this was serious. This wasn't some family squabble anymore. As they walked out of the room, Helen turned back to me. You'll regret this, Lily. You'll end up alone with nothing. No man will ever want you. I looked at her, feeling strangely calm. I'd rather be alone than unalive, and thanks to my father, I do have something. I have enough to take care of myself and my daughter, without you. She opened her mouth to say something else, but the officers guided her out. Mark didn't say another word. He just looked at me one last time with a mix of anger and something that almost looked like shame, then disappeared through the door. 3 weeks later, we were in court for the first hearing about the forged signature and the threats. Mark showed up looking thinner, his hair messy, his eyes tired. Helen didn't come. Her health had suddenly gotten worse, according to her lawyer. My side of the courtroom had Mr. Harris, Daniel, the recordings, the documents, and the bank manager's testimony. His side had excuses. He tried everything. He said he never meant it. He said he was pressured by debt. He said his mother pushed him. He said he loved me too much to ever hurt me. But those recordings didn't care about his excuses. They just kept playing the truth. At one point, the judge looked at him and said, Mr. Parker, even if you never carried out these plans, the fact that you spoke so calmly about them, combined with the forged policy and the attempted transfer, makes it very hard to believe this was just stress talk. When the judge said that, Mark's hand started shaking. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw exactly what I had imagined in my hook, my husband sitting there pale and shaking, while everyone stared at him like they were seeing him for the first time. The court process is still ongoing, but the temporary decisions were a big win for me. The judge granted me temporary full custody of Chloe, with supervised visits for Mark only if a child psychologist approved. The court ordered a freeze on any attempt for Mark or Helen to touch my assets. His company, once they heard what was happening, suspended him. Later I heard they let him go quietly. They didn't want someone like that in a position of trust. As for me, I moved out of that house. With Mr. Harris's help, I rented a small apartment closer to Chloe's school. It's nothing fancy, but it's peaceful. There's no one criticizing how I sweep the floor or how I cook. There's no one telling my daughter that her mother is ungrateful. I used some of the inheritance to pay off my own small debts and put most of it into fixed deposits and a clear education fund for Chloe. We arranged it so that even if something happens to me, the money goes to a trust managed by Mr. Harris's firm, not to Mark or his family. Sometimes, late at night, I still replay those conversations in my head. I still can't fully believe that the man I married was ready to choose money over my life. But then I look at Chloe sleeping peacefully, hugging her stuffed bunny, and I remind myself, I chose us. They chose money. That's the difference.
From everything that happened, I learned that blindly trusting someone, even a spouse, with your life and your money can be dangerous if you don't know your own rights. Love should never require you to ignore red flags or sign away your safety. So if you're in a situation like mine, please don't stay silent and hope people change. Protect yourself and your children first. If you've been through something similar or want to share your own story, write it in the comments. Don't forget to share this video with your friends, hit the like button, and subscribe so you don't miss the next stories.